It's funny. I didn't think much about my liver until recently. I mean, growing up, nobody really talks about it, right? You hear about heart disease, you hear about cholesterol, maybe diabetes, but your liver, that's just somewhere in the background. And then you hit your 40s and things start to feel a little different. Not bad, just different. You don't bounce back the same way. You get tired a little easier. You start paying attention to your annual checkups a bit more seriously. And I remember sitting there during a routine visit a while back, and my doctor mentioned liver enzymes. Didn't explain much, just said, we'll keep an eye on it. And that stuck with me because I realized I had no idea what that actually meant. So I figured instead of guessing, let's talk to someone who actually knows what's going on. Dr. David is here with us, decades of experience, seen just about everything when it comes to metabolic and liver health. Doctor, I want to start with something very real because I think a lot of people listening are probably in the same place I was. If I feel mostly okay, maybe just a little more tired than I used to be, is there actually something I should be worried about?
That's a very good question. And I'll tell you, you're not alone in thinking that way. In fact, most of my patients in their 40s and 50s come in with that exact mindset. They don't feel sick, they're functioning, life goes on. But when we run tests, we sometimes find early signs of liver stress, and that disconnect between how someone feels and what's actually happening, that's where the problem lies.
That's honestly the part that gets me because I've always been the kind of person who thinks if nothing hurts, I'm probably fine.
Right. And for many parts of the body, that's somewhat reasonable. But the liver doesn't follow that rule. It's a very quiet organ. It doesn't have many pain receptors, so it doesn't signal distress in obvious ways. Over the years, I've seen patients who felt completely normal, but had significant fat accumulation or inflammation in the liver,
That's wild.
because it means you can't really rely on how you feel. Exactly. You have to look a little deeper.
So, what's actually driving this? Because I think a lot of people, including me, honestly, still associate liver problems with drinking.
Yes, that's a common assumption. But today, one of the biggest causes is something called non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. And what's important is it affects people who don't drink. I've seen patients who rarely touch alcohol, but still develop fatty liver. That surprised me when I first started seeing it more frequently. Wait, so you're telling me someone can do everything right in terms of alcohol and still have liver issues? Yes, because the main drivers now are metabolic, diet, especially high sugar intake, physical inactivity, insulin resistance. Over time, the liver starts storing fat, and at first that doesn't cause symptoms, but eventually it can lead to inflammation. And from there, things can progress.
You know what's interesting? When you say that, I'm thinking about my own habits. Like, I don't drink much, but sugar, processed food, sitting a lot during the day, that hits a little closer to home.
And that's exactly why this condition has become so common. It doesn't feel extreme. It just feels like normal life.
All right, so let's say someone like me is listening and thinking, okay, maybe I should pay more attention. What are the early signs? Like, not the scary ones, the subtle ones, the ones people usually miss.
That's a great way to frame it. The early signs are rarely dramatic. One of the most common is fatigue, but not just being tired after a long day. This is more like your energy never fully resets. You sleep, but you don't feel refreshed. You get through the day, but it takes more effort than it used to.
That's actually uncomfortably relatable.
Yeah, and that's why it's easy to dismiss. People just think, I'm getting older, or I've been busy. But sometimes there's more going on. Another thing I hear from patients, often casually, is a sense of fullness on the right side of the abdomen. Not pain, just awareness. Like something feels slightly off.
Okay, I've definitely had moments like that where I just ignore it.
Most people do, and in many cases it's nothing serious. But sometimes it's the liver becoming slightly enlarged due to fat or inflammation.
What about things you can actually see? Because I feel like people need something concrete.
There are a few. One is subtle yellowing in the eyes, not full jaundice, just a slight tint, and it's caused by bilirubin buildup when the liver isn't processing it efficiently. Another is changes in urine or stool, darker urine, lighter stool. Those can reflect how bile is being handled.
It's interesting Because those are things people see every day, but don't connect to anything.
Exactly. The signals are there. They're just easy to overlook.
I want to ask about something that sounds completely unrelated: itching. I've heard that mentioned before and always thought it was weird.
It does sound unrelated, but it can be connected. When bile flow is disrupted, certain compounds build up in the bloodstream. They can affect the skin, causing persistent itching without a rash. And patients often try different lotions or treatments without realizing the source is internal.
That's kind of frustrating.
It can be, and it highlights how indirect some of these signals are. Now, when symptoms become more obvious, like swelling in the legs or abdomen, that's when we're dealing with more advanced stages. So, ideally, you want to catch things before that. Exactly. And that's where testing comes in. Simple blood tests can reveal a lot. ILT, IST bilirubin. These markers tell us how the liver is doing internally. And imaging, like ultrasound, can detect fat accumulation early. So instead of guessing, you're actually checking. Exactly. And that makes all the difference.
Let me be honest for a second. I think a lot of people, including me at one point, hear all this and think, oh, okay, maybe I'll just do a detox. Drink some juice for a week, take a few supplements, reset everything. Does that actually work?
I understand the appeal, but the reality is the liver doesn't need a detox. It already detoxifies your body every day. What it needs is consistent support, not short-term extremes.
So, what does that actually look like in real life?
It's simpler than people expect. Reducing sugar intake, being mindful of alcohol, avoiding unnecessary medications, especially overuse of acetaminophen, staying active, sleeping well. These aren't dramatic changes, but they're effective. So it's less about doing something extreme and more about doing the basics consistently. Exactly. And over time, that consistency allows the liver to recover. I've seen patients improve their liver function significantly just by making steady changes.
That's actually reassuring because it means you're not stuck.
Not at all. The liver has a remarkable ability to heal, but timing matters. So if there's one thing people should take away from this, don't wait until something feels wrong. That's right, because your liver doesn't always speak loudly. Sometimes it whispers, and the sooner you listen, the more options you have.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. I think for a lot of us, especially at this stage of life, it's less about reacting and more about paying attention earlier.
Exactly. Because your body is always giving you information. The question is, are you noticing it? Or just assuming everything is fine?